For decades now, government employees in states like Colorado and California have faced unique Social Security restrictions. Now, as survivor benefits expand and pension rules change, we're tracking a transformation that could mean thousands in additional monthly benefits for some retirees. The Social Security Fairness Act arrives at a critical moment. So we're going to discuss what it is and what it means to you right now on UBS Trending. Hi, everybody, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm Anthony Pastore. Thanks for joining us for this conversation today on the Social Security Fairness Act. I have a lot of questions about it myself, and who better to join me than from Nuveen, Rob Crone, who is a Managing Director and Head of Advisor Education. So, Rob, great to have you. I know you must be getting a lot of questions on this new law that just passed on January 5th, so thanks for coming by.
No, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Yes, lots of questions.
I have a lot of questions for you, but I thought probably the best way to do this is let's level set. For those of us who don't know or understand it, tell us what the Social Security Fairness Act is, because it literally just passed in President Biden's last days in office. So what is it from a high level?
Sure. So essentially what it does is eliminate two provisions that either reduced or completely eliminated benefits for folks who earned a pension while not paying the Social Security payroll tax.
Back to what you were saying, if there were government pension offsets, windfall elimination provisions, probably not important to know what those names are, but to understand that's what the restrictions were. So now that this has opened up and people who weren't contributing to the Social Security because of their pensions, who are those people? Who's impacted by these changes?
So, as you mentioned, there are two groups of individuals impacted. There are folks impacted by something called the windfall elimination provision, or WEP. Those were people who had worked in a job where they did pay into Social Security for at least 10 years, so they had earned a Social Security benefit, but they also had this uncovered pension. It's a term that the government used to basically describe anyone who earned a pension while not paying the Social Security payroll tax for the entity that gave them that pension.
Right.
So that first group, windfall elimination provision, are people who earned their own Social Security benefit but also have this uncovered pension. And what happened was the formula that was used to calculate their Social Security benefit was different than everybody else, and it resulted in a lower monthly benefit. In some cases, over $500 less every month than someone who wasn't in that situation.
Right. We pulled up an example on the screen that you provided to us. This is what you're talking about here, correct?
So this is actually going to be the government pension offset, which that's the other universe of people.
Right.
So these are people who may or may not have earned a Social Security benefit, but they're married to someone or were married to someone who had earned a Social Security benefit. And so normally they would be eligible for a spousal benefit while that person was alive. And then when that person passed away, they'd be able to collect a survivor benefit. But the government pension offset basically either reduced or eliminated that money based on how big their government pension was. So government pension offset. And the way it worked was, and as this example shows, that 2/3 of their pension, so let's just say for an example, we have someone who was an executive paying into Social Security. They earned a $2,000 a month pension.
Right.
Then you have a spouse who was a teacher in the state of Colorado and had earned a $900 a month pension. So they weren't a teacher for a long time, but they earned a pension. What's going to happen is while that other person is alive, the spousal benefit they would be able to get is going to be reduced by 2/3 of their $900 a month teacher pension. So let's just say they were going to get a spousal benefit as shown on the screen that normally would have been $1,000 a month. Well, now because of that 2/3 reduction, they're only going to get $400 a month.
Okay.
That goes away.
Right. So is it, by the way, is all of this retroactive? How does it work, and when will they start to see these payments?
So it gets a little complicated there. So first off, it is retroactive to the beginning of last year. So essentially they're removing WEP and GPO for all of last year and then going forward. And what they need to do is they now need to figure out, one, how to make all the changes in the system so that everybody going forward gets a proper amount, not the reduced amount. But they also have to figure out how to go back and give everybody that makeup money, if you will.
Right.
And what the Social Security Administration has told us is, first off, they didn't get any additional funding in this bill. So they've got to figure out how to do this with existing staff. They're already understaffed. They've kind of been in a hiring freeze since November of last year. And a lot of these changes are going to require manual intervention. And so they've basically cautioned us that it could be over a year before everybody sees the impact and the increased monies, both on a monthly basis and a lump sum basis.
All right, so here's the million-dollar question, at least for me. So there are many people who are not part of either of these particular restrictions, who have been just paying into Social Security since the starts of their career, like me or you, for example, being in private industry. What happens then to the Social Security Trust Fund? As we know, there's already a bit of an expiration date on it before this new Fairness Act was passed. And I know the Social Security Administration has been scrambling to figure out how to extend it. Congress needs to step in at some point. What happens there? There's so much to unpack in that question, I know. But how are they going to pay for this, and how much is it going to impact the rest of us who are not part of this?
Right. Well, let's just start with, before the Fairness Act, we were on the clock. We basically had another decade. Sometime between 2033 and 2035, the trust fund was going to be exhausted. And essentially what that means is, at that point, Social Security can only pay out what it brings in revenue. And at that point, they're estimating they're only going to be bringing in about 80% of what they need to cover all their expenses. We're actually in that kind of a scenario right now.
Right.
Starting in 2021, Social Security was bringing in less revenue than it was needing to pay out. That was the first time in 40 years. So from 1981 to the end of 2020, we brought in more money every year than we needed, and we built up this big trust fund. Well, starting in 2021, we had to kind of dip into the piggy bank to make up that gap.
A lot of boomers out there who are retiring.
Well, absolutely. A lot of boomers, and again, we have fewer workers paying for every person in there.
Right.
But all of that was known back in the early 80s when they made all the changes to Social Security to supposedly fix it. They didn't get everything right. Not all the assumptions were right. And so they started letting Congress know in the early 90s, hey, look, we didn't get all the math right. You guys are going to need to make a few more changes. Otherwise, in the 2030s, the math's not going to work.
Right.
And Congress just has ignored that since then.
And the math is still not working.
And it's not working.
Right.
And we're actually at this point now where we're dipping into the trust fund, and we will up until it's gone. So Congress has got to make changes if they don't want this 20% cut across the board. But we're kind of in a rock and a hard place at that point. So they're either going to have to make changes, or they're going to let everybody get a 20% cut. And so when we look at the Fairness Act, essentially what it did is it's going to deplete those reserves a little bit sooner, because they're estimating that the cost of paying these additional benefits is about $200 billion over the next decade. And that equates to about a 6-month acceleration of the trust fund being depleted.
So it's like 10 years minus 6 months, so 9.5 years, give or take.
Give or take.
Right, okay. So I guess the final kind of wrap-up question I would ask you then, Rob, is, we've got a lot of financial advisors who are watching this, and I know they've had questions, and now that they're seeing this, I'm sure they understand more cohesively what's going on here. And they have clients. So what should they be doing for the clients that they have that maybe are still working and will retire soon and may be part of the Fairness Act, and all of a sudden they're going to have some more money coming in monthly, or they're retirees who now will see some more payment coming in on a monthly basis? What's your recommendation that they do here from this point?
Well, let's start with that last group. So people who are retired, who are currently subject to that windfall elimination provision. It's estimated there are about 2.1 million people who are impacted by that. And then there's another 750,000 people who are impacted by the government pension offset. And on the screen, you can see a map of the United States that's basically showing you where the concentration of these people live, because there are certain states that have more state employees not paying into Social Security. So California, Nevada, Colorado, Louisiana, Illinois, Ohio, Massachusetts. There are others, but those are kind of big ones. that's where you're going to start, is the people who are currently impacted and making sure they know that at some point here in the future, their monthly check is going to go up and they should be getting a lump sum for all the money they should have received going back to January of last year.
Right.
That's the people that we know about. The real action item for advisors and for people who are hearing this news are those people who are eligible for a spousal or a survivor benefit, but didn't file for it because they were told, look, your government pension's too big, you're not going to get one, so why bother? And so they didn't. They didn't file for that spousal or survivor benefit. They need to do that now.
Get ahead of it.
Well, they need to file because they won't get the money.
Right.
Once Social Security gets around to figuring out how to do all this, those people aren't on the list.
They're not going to get it, right?
Right? So to get on the list, you've got to actually apply for that benefit. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that Social Security will let you backdate an application up to 6 months. So it's like, hey, I forgot to do this. Let's do it as though it were 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So since they're going to retro back to the beginning of last year, you want to get your application in sooner rather than later. Now, it is possible that they will let anybody affected by this backdate things all the way to January of last year. So if you are applying for the first time as someone impacted by this, you should absolutely put a note in your application of, I'd like to go back to January of last year, because ideally, like, I get all the money I'm entitled to, right? But they might not let you do that. And so that's why the sooner you apply for this benefit, the better.
Great advice, honestly. And I think, probably what I would do is recommend people go to ssa.gov. There's probably a lot of information there.
So they do. They have a dedicated page. So when you go to ssa.gov right now, up at the top, there's a banner for the Social Security Fairness Act. And if you click on that, it'll give you a lot of really good, timely information. And so I'd encourage
Terrific.
everyone to stay tuned there.
Yeah, I just pulled it up on my my tablet here, and yes, this the second link right at the top.
Yeah.
So, hey, Rob, thank you so much. Honestly, this was it's a complicated topic for those that are not in the know. So, thanks for breaking it down. I think you really helped a lot of us, especially me, kind of understand what's really going on here. And thanks for giving such a great advice to our financial advisors. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Rob Crone from Nuveen. And thank you all for joining us. Lots more information on this topic and more. You can find it on our Insights website at ubs.com/views. Plus, you can follow UBS on social media. We're on all the major channels, including Instagram. Follow us at UBS Trending. Lots of UBS Studios content there for you to take a look at. And as always, please make sure you are continuing this conversation with your financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. Have a great rest of your day. And remember to keep your eyes on what's trending. We'll see you soon.